Two men from a Nanaimo area First Nation are still considered by many to be heroes more than 50 years after a historic hunting trip. They shot 6 deer out of season and were charged under the BC Game Act. And their groundbreaking journey through the court system takes us back to a document signed this week in history, 160 years ago.
The Supreme Court decision is unanimous. The Chilcotin First Nation is awarded title to a massive tract of land near Williams Lake. This momentous decision can be traced back to another trial that played out in a Nanaimo courtroom 50 years ago.
6 deer carcasses were in the trunk, along with 322 hunting rifles.
1963, Clifford White and David Bobb were found guilty of hunting out of season, but
they appealed the decision based on the fact that they had what they called a treaty that was signed between the representatives of the Snuneymuxw First Nation and Sir James Douglas.
The Douglas Treaties. There were 14 in all. This one signed this week in December 1854.
Their name was phonetically rendered and followed by an X, which was supposed to symbolize their signatures. The text, the body of the treaty or the agreement itself was left blank.
No text, but there was an understanding, a cultural accommodation that went into the documents.
You can't just read them as signatures that had text added to them later. They had more significance and more meaning, some kind of moral and political imperative that accompanies the document.
White and Bobb won their appeal, and when the Crown appealed that ruling, White and Bobb won that too.
It was the first time in common law that the Douglas Treaties were ever recognized as treaties in court.
The ruling of Justice Norris is still considered influential, but it wasn't till nearly 20 years later the true impact was realized.
In 1982, when the Constitution recognized pre-existing treaties, giving the Douglas Treaty constitutional weight, it was only then that people began to realize, well, you know, in 1963, this was the first time that these treaties actually were formally recognized.
These documents have influenced Aboriginal title negotiations as far away as Australia, and they remain carefully preserved, a vital part of BC's rich history.
This Week in History, brought to you by the Royal BC Museum, bringing British Columbia's stories together.